tonight's meeting of the Planning, Building, Environmental Committee meeting. My name is Joanne Chichok, and I'm chairing tonight's meeting. As with all of our meetings, we are now taping these meetings for public review within 48 hours of the actual recording of the meeting, so it will be available later for those of you here who wish to have a replay of what happened this evening. We're asking that all members of the public and members of council refrain from use of cell phones, so please put them on vibrate or silent for the balance of this meeting. And additionally, that was it. The additional is that tonight, Councillor Rayner has sent his regrets and that we wish him Godspeed and good health. He's just undergone some minor surgery. He's expecting to be back with us very shortly. Okay, having said all that, is there any wish for change of order of items on the agenda? None. Okay, disclosure of pecuniary interest and or conflict of interest on any of the items for this evening. Seeing none, then we'll move on to public meetings under the Planning Act. We have one for this evening, and it is a public meeting to consider a zoning bylaw amendment application by John Verdonk. Planning Act requires in section 34 sub 12 that before passing a zoning bylaw amendment, council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect of the amendment. The purpose of this public meeting is to receive comments and answer questions from the public regarding the amendment to the Township of West Lincoln zoning bylaw. At this point, no decision has been made on the proposed amendment, and any comments received this evening will be taken into account by this committee and or council in their consideration of the matter. Planning Act also requires through section 34 sub 13, the council advise the public that if a person or a public body does not make an oral submission at this meeting or make a written submission to the Township of West Lincoln before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of this council to the Ontario Municipal Board. Clerk, can you please advise the method and dates by which notice was given of this public meeting?
Proper notice was given by way of individual notice dated August 10th, 2017.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure, Mr. Trouble, if it's you that will explain the purpose and reason for this, or whether you'll have one of your staff, so I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ready. Thank you, Madam Chair. Garrett is going to make a presentation tonight on this application.
Before we go there, I apologize if the recording of this meeting seems to not have the initial voice on it. I just realized the microphone was not turned on. So I'm hardwired now. Garrett?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Application for rezoning has been made by John Verdonk for a property located at 2251 Silverdale Road. Joanne, if you could put the, there we go. By John Verdonk at 2251 Silverdale Road, just south of 16 Road, partially within the hamlet of Silverdale. This rezoning is required in order to fulfill a condition of consent from application B3 2017, which conditional approval for this consent was granted earlier this year in February by the Committee of Adjustment. As you can see, the conditional approval was given to sever Part 1 from the main farm parcel, which was Part 2. This conditional approval created a new residential lot of 1 acre in size within the hamlet of Silverdale. The 1 acre parcel conditionally approved is covered by nearly 50% regulated floodplain. Which is this area here to the north of the parcel, or in the north of the parcel, which makes it difficult for this property to be serviced by a regular conventional septic system. A hydrogeological study was required to create a parcel under 1 hectare in size within a hamlet boundary, so one was completed by the applicant, and that hydrogeological study said that this lot could be developed and sewage treatment could be possible through a tertiary system, which you see on this site plan. And the hydrogeological study also determined the maximum size of house through a maximum sewer flow rate, which this lot could accommodate. So this rezoning is required for three main reasons. One is to ensure that any proposed dwelling on this property maintains or stays within that 1,600 liters per day maximum flow rate that's permitted under the hydrogeological study. And the second main reason why this zoning is needed is to ensure that the area for septic beds here, these proposed areas for septic beds, one is the main septic bed, the other is the reserve bed area in case the main bed ever fails, are left clear of any structures or buildings, mainly accessory structures. So as you can see, we have proposed some setbacks, which are on this diagram. These setbacks include a 51-meter front yard setback, a 35-meter setback to the north property line, a 5-meter setback to the east property line, and a 5-meter setback to the south property line, ensuring that development for accessory structures, such as your garden shed or your pool or your playground equipment, should be located outside of that septic bed area, the mantle, and the reserve bed area. And finally, the rezoning is required to recognize that Part 2, the retained agricultural lands that are undersized are supposed to be, according to the bylaw, 40 hectares in size, and this Part 2 is only 18.4 hectares in size, I believe. And to start with, it was still under the 40 hectares that was required, so it is not that, it's pretty minor. That's all.
Thank you very much. This is now the point at which there is opportunity for the public to make submissions on this particular application. Are there any persons here this evening that wish to come to the microphone and put a position forward or ask questions regarding this application? I do apologize. I forgot to ask if the applicant was here. It is your opportunity first before the public were to make comment, and not seeing an overwhelming number. Is there anything you wish to add to our staff's position on this particular application at this point?
I think Garrett has explained it.
Okay. Now, are there members of the public here wishing to make comment on this application? I'll ask one more time. Is there any members of the public here present that would wish to make comment on this application? Seeing none, this may be the only public meeting held with respect to this application. Therefore, members of the public who would like to make comment or provide written comments before council considers this application should do so now this evening or in writing prior to any consideration and a bylaw passing. So, since there are no people here present that may wish to come forward, anyone from the public wishing to make comment should put their comments in writing and direct them to the Director of Planning for the Township of West Lincoln prior to the consideration by this committee and/or council for this application. Members of committee, is there anyone here present wishing to ask questions of staff and/or the applicant? Sorry, I was distracted. Councillor Bilsma.
Thank you very much. I was a little confused by this slide that's still up. That pink area that's been highlighted, that is just correct me if I'm wrong, then through you to Garrett, I don't know, director, assistant director. That pink area, that's an area that could be available then for garden sheds, swings, pools. That's why it's been blocked out. There's sufficient for a house. That's what that's being denoted there.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, that is the area there where accessory buildings can be located. And there's one other thing I forgot to mention. We've also put a maximum lot coverage for accessory buildings to 2% through this rezoning. That's what we're recommending. That way, and 2% does not cover that whole area.
No.
So
no.
2% is only around 85 square meters. And I apologize, I have no idea what that is in square feet.
It's okay. Thank you, that's all.
Councilor Bell?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Garrett. You put a lot of emphasis on the septic system, the backup septic system, 1,600 liters per day. But what is the normal that a septic system will handle per day or required?
Through you, Madam Chair, I believe that 1,600 liters per day is equivalent to around a 3-bedroom household. Brian can correct me if I'm wrong.
Further to that, it's more or less the consumption that's average for a 3-bedroom house with the amenities of a house this square footage. But Mr. Treble, is that where that 1,600 comes from?
Yes, that's correct, Madam Chair. Through you, there's sort of two ways that under the building code they tend to come at this this calculation. One is the number of fixtures in the house, sinks and toilets and that kind of thing, and the other is based on the number of bedrooms or the number of, I guess, sort of the number of people that one would
Maximum
associate
occupancy.
based on that. Exactly. So this is a pretty standard house. It's not a restricted flow rate to any substantive degree. The bigger issue here is just the fact that we have a limited area available. We have to use that half acre efficiently because that's all we have. And if we mess that up, we can't go into the floodplain. So it's really just to sort of make sure it's transparent on the surface in the zoning bylaw that if you hit that maximum 1,600 liters per day, we didn't want to tie it down to fixtures or bedrooms because it could be combinations. But if you don't exceed that 1,600, the theory says that this will work.
So the next question is, I seen the 3 bedrooms in the document, but I didn't see square footage of the house. Is it a 2,000 square home, 5,000? I mean, saying it's 3 bedrooms is nice. How big are the bedrooms, you know what I'm saying? Like, you could house 4 kids in a bedroom. So I'm not sure how the bedrooms tie in
Councilor Bill?
to the septic system. Okay, I'm not talking about that. Sorry. I'm just trying, like, to me, 1,600 seems like an awful lot. I'm trying to understand it for my own.
Well,
Mr. Treble?
through you, Madam Chair, again, the attempt is not to try and regulate the number of bedrooms. It's more to regulate the flow, because the flow is the number that's the most important piece of the puzzle. It's the amount of water or gray water that can be treated and properly disposed of in this tertiary system that's proposed. So, you know, they'll have to design it and provide it to our building inspector for review. And if it's 3 bedrooms, then it's going to have no more than X fixtures, whatever that's going to work out to. Or if it's 2 bedrooms, there'll be a different number. So we'll look at the bottom line to say, okay, this plus this equals 1,600 liters per day or less, so then it's fine. And it would have to, sorry, Madam Chair, and it would have to fit inside the building envelope for normal setbacks in the
So
in the
expected
zoning.
effluent is what you're trying to predict,
There you
not
go.
the gray water.
No, correct, thank
And
you.
my last question is that you have the septic system and then you have the backup septic system in case the original doesn't work. If the original fails, is there a test procedure in place once a year for the backup system to make sure that it's functional?
Through you, Madam Chair, tertiary systems do require that there be an agreement between the property owner and the installer or the designer. Some individual is responsible for ensuring an annual maintenance. I believe those annual maintenance reports are supposed to be filed with the township. I can't say right now that we get them all, but I believe there's supposed to be a filing mechanism. But there's a relationship between the individual owner and the unit designer or installer.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, please be advised that this is a technical report being considered this evening by Planning Committee and that a recommendation report will be forthcoming to a future Planning Committee and/or Council meeting. Please also be advised that once the Planning Committee and Council have made a decision with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment, a notice of its passing will be circulated with an appeal period. There is a sign-in attendance sheet located at the table near the exit doors, which we would ask anyone present to sign. Please ensure that signing the attendance sheet for this evening's committee meeting, that you prepare and check the column marked John S. Verdonk if you wish to be advised of any subsequent meetings and/or decisions on this matter. Sorry, I fumble only because there are not anybody else in the audience except the applicant who will be advised of any future meetings. But in an abundance of precaution, I will say that therefore, people who are interested in observing council and/or committee discussions about a particular bylaw should not solely rely on mailed notices and thus miss the opportunity to attend meetings. It is suggested that you watch the township's website for posting of agendas to review items that will be discussed at committee and/or council. The agendas for meetings are posted on the township website at 4 p.m. on Friday prior to the meeting. Additionally, meetings scheduled are also noted on the town's website and are available for public view. If you wish to receive notices by email, it is suggested that you include your email and address with your mailing address and your phone number on the attendance sign-up sheet. I declare this public meeting adjourned at 6:53. So we'll move back into the regular agenda. Thank you very much. That concludes our public meetings for this evening. There we go. The next item is appointments. There are no appointments, but this is the opportunity to request to address items on the agenda. That would be by members of the public. Seeing none, I would suggest that we move on to the consent agenda items. They consist of 4 items. That would be the minutes of the Public Advisory Committee. There's a recommendation. The minutes of the Public Advisory Committee, the recommendation report for the revised subdivision agreement authorizing bylaw for Old Town Gateway Estates, Smithville Station, now being developed by Mars Homes, Smithville Station, Inc., and recommendation report PD 118, updates on the natural heritage policies for the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, and item number 4, a recommendation report for the agricultural system mapping and implementation procedures for consultation. That would be that this committee hereby approves the following consent agenda items. I'm going to put the motion on the floor and then I'll take questions, if that's okay. That item 1 be and is hereby received for information, and that items 2 to 4 be and are hereby received, and the recommendations contained therein be adopted. I need a mover. Or did anyone want to pull an item? Okay, Mr. Mayor?
Madam Chair, I'd like to pull number 3, please.
Okay, I see some of your colleagues. 3, and Councillor Bilsman, did you have an item you? Okay. Thank you. I think that if we could, I'd also like to see number 4 pulled, just for comment. So that would change our recommendation for items 2 are hereby received and recommendations contained therein be adopted, as well as item 1 be and is hereby received for information. I need a mover and seconder for that. I have Councillor Bell, Councillor Bilsma. All in favor? Oh, comments on those two? Any? None. Okay, thank you. All in favor? Those motions carry. Now we move back to item 3, recommendation report PD 118, updates on the natural heritage policies for the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. Mayor Joyner, you pulled that item?
Yes, I did. I believe Councillor Gannan wants to speak.
Councillor Gannan also wishes to speak.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, Mr. Treble, I'm just a little bit confused about process here a little bit, so I read the 2 recommendations coming forward. What I want to know is 2 things. Have we identified any natural heritage? Have we made comment about any natural heritage in the township of West Lincoln? And my second question has to do with process. So we identify what we want to talk about. We then send it to the province. They then send us back the maps, and then we have another chance to then comment. Am I correct? Is that how the procedure is going to go through you, Madam Chair?
Thank you. Mr. Treble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure that we're going to have as many opportunities to comment as we might all want. What the province has announced through their policy review is that they want to get into mapping at the provincial level. So to answer the first part of your question, Mr. Mayor, through you, Madam Chair, the mapping that I guess we are relying on is the mapping that we've put together through the assistance of the Conservation Authority in the region. So we certainly have within our new zoning bylaw and our official plan environmental protection and environmental conservation authority layers. And they are protected through the regional official plan and the township official plan, as well as the regulatory authority of the Conservation Authority. What the province appears to now be doing is adding another layer on top of all of that, which is kind of like the Greenbelt approach, only applying to something. The map that we have in the document, which is page 8 of the actual report attachment, sorry, page 15 of the actual report of attachment 2, the scale is such that it's almost impossible to read it. So what is of provincial significance versus what we've protected, I just don't know the relationship yet. So that's why I'm asking that we see the mapping. Whether the province agrees to give us that opportunity or not is yet to be seen. In an ideal world, I would like to think the province would prepare a map, provide it to us for review and input before it actually gets implemented or endorsed. But my reach out to the province so far has effectively garnered a comment to say, we're in a hurry to get this done. The October deadline is fixed, so get your comments in one way, shape, or form and hope for the best. That's about as much as I've been able to get out of the province to date. So the concern I guess I have is I know what we've done, I know what we've identified as layers and areas of protection, but I don't know what the province will do. If they layer everything with another layer of provincial support, it becomes very difficult to start changing that stuff. So I wouldn't mind knowing, is the province looking at just, PSWs, the provincially significant wetlands, and maybe some sort of a border on each side of 20 Mile Creek, or just how intensive are they going? I don't know the answer to that.
So, thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Treble, thank you for that answer, and that was the answer I was hoping you weren't going to give us. Just quite simply because, as you've stated, so, they want our comments, so we give them our comments, but our comments are based on the region's official plan and the township's official plan. So when we give them, then they come back, and you've asked quite readily that the province provides detailed mapping to each lower tier municipality at a scale that is legible and readable for review and approval. So then they're going to come forward with the maps. I guess really the only chance we have after that is to go through some kind of provincial appeal process if we don't like what they've mapped out. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm not even sure I know the answer to that. But if they certainly take the Greenbelt approach, we know how well that works.
Well,
So
if it mimics the 2003 establishment of the Greenbelt,
Yeah.
there is no consultation, Mr. Mayor. This is being taken over by the province at a level and at a height of mapping that doesn't have nearly the detail that the authorities below them have. So you'll notice 2003, there was an election in 2004. Oh, do I point that out?
But point duly noted. But even the Greenbelt had an appeal process, even when those
It did.
maps were put out. As we understand, Grimsby went through that appeal process once they figured out that they were being snafu'd through that policy. So,
I'm optimistic, but the devil's in the details, and we just don't have those as of right now, Madam Chair, through you. The other piece, if I can, just for the record, I believe everyone will have a copy of a document that looks much like this on their desk tonight. I don't think the full extent of this actually made it into the report, so I provided it separately. It kind of talks about the theory as to how they're doing the work, but it doesn't give you the actual work they're doing, so that's still missing.
okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Gannan, I think you wish to speak to this, and I'll take comment from everyone.
Yeah, I do actually, but I think Mr. Treble has probably partially answered the question because you're looking at the same thing. I was also looking at it from the perspective of our Conservation Authority, and as I read through the document and then reread through the document, I couldn't figure out whether they were looking to sort of replace that authority, take some of their authority away, or whether they were giving more sort of meat and more teeth to their ability to control things. Did you have a sense, as you read that, Mr. Treble, that you could comment on?
I don't have a complete sense, except to say that it would appear that the province is trying to put more control at their level.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This does come at the end of their review of the Conservation Authority's, Councillor Gannan, so point well taken. They've just made changes to the Conservation Act throughout the province, and then this comes out. So, Councillor Bilsma.
Thank you very much. I don't know exactly who could answer this, but perhaps the Director of Planning could. So I'll direct the question to him. Is there any talk sideways, other municipalities' concerns about this kind of layering, another bureaucracy that we need to, deal with, fight through, layer upon layer upon layer. And just to kind of speak in broad strokes, a lot of times we use terms like, this is Toronto people telling the rest of the province how, land use and those kind of issues. Communities like, like most of Ontario, which lies outside of Toronto, what's the word on the street? Is there Roma? What do they think of this? Or is that another organization largely steered by a large, urban mindset?
I would say that Councillor Treble, that's exactly who should be answering that. But I think part of what you're looking for is a political answer, and I think that Mr. Treble can tell you the process that he's aware of. But I think Roma, AMO,
Yeah,
et cetera,
no. So
is a
I'm-
political answer, and Councillor Treble should
Mostly, I'm trying to
answer that.
I'm trying to see if other municipalities faced with this same reality are going, what gives here?
If you'll remember what happened in 2003, there was something like 12,000 acres taken out of production, some that had been zoned, secondary plans put on
Yeah, I know.
throughout the province. So
And there are other acts, Green Energy Act being another one, where a lot of authority was stripped out of.
Places to Grow, many other places,
All
all
kinds of
those
these
acts.
programs. And so I'm not going to, well, okay, maybe I'll use the R word, revolt. When's there going to be some kind of, a municipal, enough's enough? And is there something brewing of that kind to say, hey, you know what, we have enough jurisdictions covering all aspects of this. We like to, so I'm just curious.
So, Councillor, I think that you've asked a couple of questions.
Most of them.
We are
what's
children of
word
the
on-
province. You
I
must
understand that, but
remember.
what's the
I think your
what's
question.
the word on the street?
I think that I want to be careful that we don't put Mr. Treble into a position of having to answer things.
all right.
And we could ask for him to get that information, but the word revolt is
I know,
is something that we would take to AMO and have them pressure for the municipal side of things, or Roma, or both. And I do believe that Mr. Treble can talk to us about some of the other things, but I think we need to remember that as children of the province, we get told what to do. We don't get to tell them what we like, other than in kind of small circumstance. Mr. Treble, did you want to comment on that? I don't want to put you in trouble.
No, I
Trouble.
appreciate that, through you, Madam Chair. The reality is, I guess, that from a planning point of view, protecting the environment's all a good thing, right? So certainly, if they use the layers of protection that we already have, it's hard to dispute that. The issue becomes whether we need another layer of bureaucracy, and that's probably more the political piece of the puzzle. I can certainly do some investigating to see where OPPI and AMO and places like that are. Part of the challenge, I think, in this as well is the fact that they released the document, I think it was July 4th, and expect comments October 4th. And so probably 60 of those days were over the summer holiday when not a whole lot of research was able to be put into it. I've been reaching out to the region to get a sense of where they're at and what kind of comments they're coming down with. And I keep getting, we're working on it, it's coming, and it'll be available before October 4th, but that's all I'm getting. So what the region's even saying, I don't know yet. We're perhaps a little early to know exactly whether, there'll be a lot of concern or whether it's all about waiting for the detail.
Just as a point of interest, when the Greenbelt was put in, this whole thing happened the first time. The headwaters of some of the most significant and sensitive watersheds in and around Toronto, the province negotiated settlements that traded lands in some of those headwaters and put the land out in Pickering as a new development area, and they traded it 3 and 2 for 1, 4 for 1, because they'd gone through a process of approval before that. So, in fact, if there is an appeal process, I would imagine that the province will settle that as well. It won't be us that's doing it. It'll be people who have land zoned that are being removed. And I think since the first go-around, Places to Grow identified the urban areas and why urban areas and urban boundaries, I think, Mr. Treble, is that correct, are now very, very tight and have to go through a very, very long process in order to maintain the integrity of the environment surrounding them.
That would be correct, Madam Chair, and certainly the review process is heightened dramatically. Although you did make me ponder something as you were talking there, if I may, Madam Chair. The whole concept of swapping or moving or recreating wetlands and things like that, I suspect, is perhaps partly the reason why this is on the table in front of us, is because of the whole Niagara Falls issue that seemed to be front and center. So
Yes.
that may be part of why we're having this discussion tonight.
Certainly, the whole review of the Conservation Act and the problems that have been experienced, I think, are precipitating some of this. Mayor Joyner, did you wish to say something?
Well, I did. It just kind of sparked a little bit of a debate that, yes, we have been having at the Conservation Authority. I might add, though, that it wasn't the region of Niagara who started that conversation, actually, in the beginning. It was the City of Toronto who decided to talk about biodiversity offsetting. Although you never hear the City of Toronto come right out and say that, but they've had many discussions with the province before Niagara even thought of biodiversity offsetting. I noticed in your conclusion here, Mr. Treble, the second paragraph, it says, by having this natural heritage system, it will help guide municipalities, landowners, and others in their efforts to promote biodiversity by protecting natural heritage across the landscape for present and future generations of Ontarians. So obviously, this is a conversation that the province is having, and they do want to have, and in much as the same as when you talked about, Madam Chair, about the swapping of land for 3-to-1, 2-to-1, 5-to-1, that quite honestly is what biodiversity offsetting is. It's
Yes.
to protect what's there by moving it somewhere else but obtaining more land than what is being protected.
Recreating it and saving it and sheltering it.
Exactly. And so that is the balance. And really, quite frankly, it is a balance between the environmentalist and the conservation and the province in their policies. So that is a discussion for another day.
Okay. So, but it does say that, and to that point, I guess the question I asked was going to ask, if you'll allow me, is is there any talk, and I will admit that I didn't have this document before, so I was wondering about the white belt limits, because the big thing that everyone was concerned about was future growth areas when the whole natural heritage system came out, and there was extensive negotiations, of course, for the swaps that happened, not in our community, but then for the future white belt areas where future growth could happen. That isn't really being addressed in this either, is it?
Through you, Madam Chair, I suppose ultimately at the end of the day it is part of the puzzle, in the sense that if it's protected for agricultural purposes, which is the next report, or if it's protected for environmental purposes, then clearly you have a fairly high threshold to go through in order to achieve urban development on those lands. So, it's all part of, I think, ramping up the protections so that urban sprawl is not an automatic. And, I'm sure somewhere in the ivory tower of downtown Toronto there is a plan, and these pieces all fit together into that plan. We just don't have all of the pieces, or all of the big picture. We just get the pieces one by one kind of thing. So
I think that's the Pink Palace is what it's referred to, not the ivory tower.
Not the ivory tower.
No, I
So
think
sorry.
so. But it's okay. I do think that the comment that I don't want to leave off the table is that, in fact, in early 2000 to 2003, the province and AMO came to a memorandum of understanding which created natural person powers for municipalities and gave a lot more authority to municipalities. And I have to say that this, plus the following one that I've pulled, are really basically a repeal of some of those opportunities to give municipalities, whether it's an upper tier or a single tier or lower tier municipality, the authority to have jurisdiction over some decision making. So this is taking back some of what was hard fought by municipalities and just achieved in that early 2000 period. So we need to look at why the province feels that we've acted in a way that maybe as adolescents, and they feel they have to take back some of this jurisdiction. But it's a question for another day and for our opportunities with meeting with the province in the future. So Are there any other questions with regard to this? And seeing none, I would ask then for, since it's properly moved and seconded. You're right, it wasn't. We've been having this discussion out of order. I don't understand how our governance inspector, Councillor Billsma, let me do this. But now that we've had the discussion, oh gosh, can I have a mover and a seconder for this one, which the recommendation on this particular report is that this report dated September 11th be received, and that the province provides detailed mapping to the lower tier municipalities at a scale that is legible and readable for review and approval. Mayor Joyner and Councillor Ganaan. Okay, now that that's properly on the table and we've had the discussion, backwards albeit, all in favor? That motion carries. Okay, that takes us to item number 4, which was also pulled, and I asked for that to be pulled, and I apologize for taking that move, but it was basically on the same idea. It was that this seems to me that it is, again, the province looking back to what they've allowed and taking a look at the agricultural areas and suggesting that they should have more influence. I want to go to Mr. Treble and get just a little more detail, a discussion on this before I go to questions from members of council.
Through you, Madam Chair, the one piece that I've put into the report that you'll see in the second clause of the recommendation is an effort to try and identify sort of the fragmentation that exists in our township, specifically the Highway 20 corridor, and whether or not there's any appetite to allow for some areas such as the Highway 20 corridor to be looked at somehow differently as part of this discussion. It might help us resolve some of the ongoing battles we have with businesses trying to set up in the area. And certainly in some of the other assessment processes that are out there, fragmentation of the countryside is considered as part of the whole challenge as to whether the lands are viable for agricultural purposes or not. So if committee has had a chance in the attachment number 1 document to this report at page 51 of the entire package, you'll see that there have been 4 regions across the GTA that have undertaken what's known as a LEAR assessment, a local agricultural review, and it may be that the answer we get back is that the region of Niagara would have to undertaking its own LEAR analysis to look at fragmentation and other things that might impact the ability of agricultural lands to be productive and viable, given all of the non-agricultural influences that might be in the area. But I put that in the recommendation so that we kind of have it on the table. Some discussions I had with the CAO certainly suggested that it would be an appropriate or opportune time to raise that issue and suggest that the province or the region or someone take that part of the analysis seriously. If we're going to look at this, then look at the fragmentation piece that's part of it and maybe help us scope non-agricultural uses and focus them in an area so that we don't have scattered non-agricultural uses putting pressure on the agricultural areas surrounding the rest of the township. So that's the only piece I'd like to put on the table, Madam Chair, just to make sure.
Thank you. So for bringing that more fulsome explanation of what this report is about, the recommendation that needs to be put on the table is the report PD 119-17 regarding the agricultural system mapping and implementation procedures for consultation dated September 11th, 2017 be received, and that the province provide the agricultural land-based mapping to the Township of West Lincoln for review and consideration be given to the impacts of the existing fragmented parcel fabric west of Smithville on Highway 20 to the Niagara-Hamilton border. I need a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Ganaan, Councillor Billsma. Thank you. Now, having heard the addition of what Mr. Treble wanted to add, I'll take comments. Mayor Joyner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So through you to Mr. Treble. So I appreciate what you've done here on page 52 of the total report and bringing forward this LEAR score. Where has this been done in other municipalities across Ontario, and have we done this in Niagara already, anytime? And why do we have to go this far when really the bypass was on the books by, I think it was a federal bypass at one time, and then it became a provincial bypass, and now it's still on the books, and now we're dealing with Highway 20 as being a regional road. So are we going to great lengths to actually do this and prove this? And do we have to? So, do you understand my questioning?
I'm not sure, but I want to make sure Mr. Treble understands it, because it's not just about the bypass. It's not just about a bypass, it's not about a mid-peninsula corridor. This is about making sure that agricultural land base is not eroded or fragmented to the point where it's not farmable. Am I correct?
That's correct. There's
So-
there's almost two pieces here, I think.
Yeah.
All right, so I took this as being just something that was being put in place to deal with the bypass. You're essentially saying that this is to talk about all of our municipality.
What the province is doing through you, Madam Chair, is the same thing they're doing with the environmental layer.
Right.
They're putting in place an agricultural layer at the provincial level, and then basically saying thou shalt not touch. So it's an opportune time, I think, to try and not only deal with things around Smithville as part of our municipal comprehensive review, which is a later report that we can talk about in more detail, but it's also a chance to perhaps put on the table the concept of looking at fragmentation, which brings in the Lear assessment. So Lear is a broad assessment that identifies a number of criteria to be used as the basis upon which to say, you know, all of the agricultural lands aren't as viable for agricultural purposes as the province might believe. Things like fragmentation, topography, stoniness, drainage, those are all criteria that can be used as part of an assessment. The mapping we're using right now is old Canada land inventory mapping from like 1930 or somewhere there. You know, things haven't changed dramatically except for fragmentation and, you know, things like that. So the reality is at the level of this report, it's looking at protecting an agricultural area the same as it's looking at protecting the environmental pieces. So I've thrown in the concept of saying, let's look at fragmentation along Highway 20. It might be the opportune time to say, okay, if we are going to have pressures for non-agricultural uses, that might be a corridor to put them in, leave the rest of the township alone from that purpose. Then from an urban boundary perspective, we can have further discussion in the last staff report, I think, Madam Chair, around the whole process that we have to go through to achieve an urban boundary expansion on that
So
particular
through you,
issue.
Madam Chair, so one of my initial questions was, are we the only one undertaking such a report, or is regional planning kind of suggesting to other municipal lower tier planners to take on this same type of study?
The reality is I don't think agriculture is as big an issue perhaps anywhere else except for here. I shouldn't say that, probably below the escarpment it's a big issue too. But the Lear assessment I think probably is something that we have an interest in more so than a lot of other municipalities. We have had discussions around Lear, and anytime it keeps coming up, it's kind of on a case-by-case basis, and the province makes it very clear that Lear should not be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. It should be looked at a broader regional level. So this report actually predates, I think, the preparation or the finalization of the region's report. So I'd like to funnel this thought in and see if there's a chance that we can get the regional staff listening to the concept of doing a Lear analysis.
Okay. Good, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? I think from where I'm sitting is these two reports come back to back, and it just is, again, the influence of the province. And if you remember back in the late, before my time, but 70s, but in the mid-80s to late 80s and early 90s, much of what it is municipalities did was centralized at the province, and subdivisions and any kind of planning was done at a provincial level, or at least was stamped as being approved. And then that's why I was referring to the fact that municipal legislation was put into place to give much more of that jurisdiction to municipalities at all levels. And now it looks like we've had the joy of that kind of thing for a while. We've flirted with it, and the province is looking at repatriating a number of the decisions and at least the major planning that and decision making for us to implement. So sorry days, because as you say, it's another level of bureaucracy, Mr. Mayor. Anyway, so we have on the table the motion properly put, moved and seconded. I'm seeing no other comments. All in favor? That motion carries. Okay. Okay, that's the conclusion of the consent items. Communication, we have 2 items on the agenda. No, 1, sorry, I apologize. And that recommendation is that the letter of resignation received on August 29th, 2017 from Mr. Mike Jankowski from the Public Advisory Committee on Wind Turbines, effective immediately, be received with regrets. I need a mover. Councillor Bilsma, and a seconder, Councillor Bell. Comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That motion carries. Thank you. So moving on to staff reports. Item P96-17. This is a technical, pardon me, this is a report with regard, yes, it's a technical report regarding the zoning bylaw amendment for Mr. Verdonk. And the recommendation on that report is that PD 12917 regarding the John Verdonk application for rezoning file number 1601-011-17 dated September 11th be received, and that a recommendation report be presented at a future Planning Building Environmental Committee meeting. I need a mover. Councillor Trombetta, Councillor Bilsma. Comments? Seeing none, all in favor? And that motion carries. Item B, item P97-17, a report from the chief building official regarding a recommendation report for new fence bylaw. And those recommendations are that report PD 127-17 regarding a new fence bylaw be received, and that the proposed draft fence bylaw be brought forward for adoption at the next council meeting, that would be September 25th, and shall be in effect for October 1st, 2017. I need a mover for that. Councillor Bell, seconded by Councillor Gannan. Comments? Seeing none? I had a couple of comments, and that is that these are a change, and it's our first fence bylaw. I'm not sure that there's an appetite by council, but putting it in the paper, telling everybody we now have a fence bylaw that is going to instruct the style of fencing, the minimum standards, and withdrawing ourselves from dispute resolution between landowners might be a little late if we put it in the paper afterwards. I'm just wondering if we want to have this in the paper. I guess it's a little late to get it there before September 25th, and we'd have to move it to the next cycle. But I wondered, out of an abundance of precaution, whether or not this should be put into the paper. And seeing no one with that appetite.
Well, hold on a second. You might have a point there.
Madam Chair.
At least a round circle.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor.
Well, it's and you're going to run into the people that potentially, have bought the material on September 27th, and, so our department is going to be faced with dealing with those grace periods, and so perhaps maybe we should talk about that. I don't want to delay this anymore either, but I do think that maybe we should do due diligence and maybe place something in the newspaper saying that this is forthcoming. Comments, questions about other people around the horseshoe, I gladly accept to hear what they have to say.
Glad to go to other members, and that was exactly the point where we've had a very rainy season. I see piles of wood around the place, and people in new subdivisions, young people, have been negotiating, I know, to have fences because there's been some grading issues out there as well. So that was my concern. Councillor Bell?
With those thoughts, instead of it coming into effect October 1st, let's push it to October 15th, put a 2-week grace plus the time you have now is a month from now before it goes into effect. It goes in the paper before the end of this week, preferably tomorrow, and we move on. I mean, it is what it is.
I have 2 speakers, and one is the CAO, and then I'll go to Councillor Trombetta.
To you, to members of council, or committee rather, we did understand that this was potentially an issue, and we crafted a potential amendment that would give us the authority to put an ad in the newspaper prior to council, so that anybody that had comments could come then. So if we pass this amendment, it would simply state that we advertised and at prior ratification by council, and that way it would be in the paper the week before.
So just clarify, you'd put it in the paper this week? And September 25th is 2 weeks away.
Through members of council to our deputy clerk, it will be next week.
Oh,
So we put it in Tuesday, we can almost consider it 6 days.
It probably.
if you're lucky enough to get the Tuesday paper.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, it's just that my problem is that rural Smithville or West Lincoln doesn't necessarily get all the papers. So if you're going to do that, just be like, let's be cautious of, out of an abundance of caution, let's not say we put it in Tuesday, oh, you didn't get it? Mr. Mayor.
So going back to Councillor Bell's kind of grace period of October 15, would we still incorporate that into the amendment too as well? Yes? Is that what I'm hearing, Madam Clerk? Madam CEO?
It's a recommendation that we put in the paper. It's going on Tuesday. Would it also hit the Thursday paper? Because some places don't get the Tuesday paper. So would you hit everyone, then they know, we'd pass it on September 25th, so they have no opportunity to comment, but it isn't in play until October 15th, correct?
Madam Chair, I think the big issue is that given the time in the week, it probably is next week's paper. So if you think the Thursday paper is better than the Tuesday paper, we can certainly aim for Thursday next week. It doesn't give a lot of notice. That's the only catch before council. But it does give lots of notice of the fact that it's in effect by the 15th, if that's the purpose. Depends on what the purpose is. If the purpose is to invite a mob of people on the on council,
we're not mob
or if it's
invitees.
just to say, you know, heads up, as of this date, it's in effect, then I think next week works. So.
I'm going to go to Mayor Jordan just quickly because Councillor Trombetta was actually ahead of you.
I
Go
want to
ahead.
just say one thing. If we could also hit the Farmers Monthly, which comes out at the beginning of the month or the first of the month, or end of the month or first, however you want to choose to say if the glass is half full or half empty. If you could hit the Farmers Monthly too as well, because I know that that's a newspaper that goes to every household in West Lincoln.
Yes.
Much to your point, Madam Chair, the Grimsby Lincoln News and the News Now don't go to every household in West Lincoln. The Farmers Monthly does.
You're right.
So if we could do that too as well, I appreciate it.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Trombetta and then we'll try and
Thank
figure
you.
out what we want to do.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, through you to Jeff. Help me out. I see this on our agenda. We're going to get a slew of calls about this fence bylaw. Can you just sum it up with the changes? I live in the rural area. I don't have a fence. I've never had a fence for years. Other members of people on this committee don't have fences either. What's the changes? What are we here to look for? If someone calls me up tomorrow and says, what's the well, I'm not going to say refer to our bylaw. What are the big changes that they got to look forward to?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Trombetta, primarily the main issue is the setting of a maximum height. Okay. So I think in preparing this bylaw, we looked at bylaws from other municipalities within the Niagara region, as well as I looked at quite a few fence bylaws from other municipalities that have a lot of rural lands as we do here. So I think in setting the maximum heights in I believe it's 6.5 feet and close to 10 feet for the agricultural lands, it's quite significant. It's not going to hold anyone back from certainly putting up a privacy fence, and that's essentially what the fence is for. If you're on a rural property and you happen to be lucky enough to have your house really close to the neighboring house, then you may want some sort of privacy fence between the two of you. Okay. And really, whoever invented the saying that good fences build good neighbors is a liar. So, because that's not the case. So what we tried to do through this bylaw is to establish some criteria to help make both sides, or
So
kind of right down the middle.
It's more of the height restrictions than anything. It's enforcing the spot. Perfect. Okay, understood. Thank you. Madam Chair. Thank you, Jeff.
So I have, just to build on that, this new bylaw establishes fencing in the rural areas to be what normal fences are out there, which is, I can't remember the name of it, but it's 5-strand wire that kind of holds cows and horses in, right? I can't remember the technical name for it.
Through you, Madam Chair, to yourself. What it does is, what you're referencing is the language regarding the dispute resolution.
No, actually, I was just saying, what's the norm, what are we looking for in the rural areas?
There is no limitation to what you can construct in the rural area.
Okay.
But that nine gauge wire, 5-strand fence is
There you
really, the only time that comes into play is when you're looking at dispute resolution. And that was put in place similar to the language or similar to the concept behind the Line Fences Act, is when two neighbors are in dispute, how do you resolve what is owed? If you and I are neighbors and you decide you want a wrought iron fence, I shouldn't necessarily be on the hook to pay for half of that. So that's where it comes into play. It establishes a level of commonality, whereas this is the level that is expected. If you wish to go beyond that, certainly you have every right to do so, but your neighbor would only be on the hook, per se, or responsible to pay half of the fence of that 9-strand wire fence. So
fair enough. And
so it just limits that, you know, thinking that they won the lottery, that I'm going to put up a wrought iron fence and my neighbor's going to pay for half. It just eliminates that responsibility right up front.
And that's where I don't think there'll be a lot of dispute. Most farmers want to either keep people in or out for safety and or keep their cattle in or whatever in. But I wanted to make Councillor Trombetta's point is that in the rural areas, there is a usual standard. In town, though, by this bylaw and dispute, we're establishing a standard, which is a frost wire, a wire fence.
Again, only for the purpose of dispute,
Correct.
right? The maximum height restriction is there, and really there's no regulation that says what you can't build your fence out of other than things that are not suitable for an urban environment, such as barbed wire and spikes and electric fences and those types of things, which are more used for keeping in livestock and those types of things, or keeping out certain folks, but certainly not applicable in an urban area.
Great. So if a real curmudgeon were there, and I think that a wire fence and a wooden fence are approximately the same right now, so no one should dispute it. But if there was a real issue, someone would then be forced to make sure that most of the fence is on their side of the property. If the neighbor didn't want to do anything but have a wire fence, we could have some places where you'd have the foolishness of a wire fence and then a privacy fence right beside it.
Through you again, Madam Chair, the bylaw doesn't establish or restrict the construction of the fence to only that type of fence. The purpose of that is simply for the purpose of defining cost. So if you chose to go ahead and build something other than the wire fence, it doesn't preclude you from doing so. It just indicates that the neighboring property would only be responsible for paying the portion that would be applicable to that, a 4-foot-high frost fence.
Right.
So if it doesn't stop you from building the 8-foot or 6-foot-high board-on-board fence. It just says that your neighbor is only responsible to pay for that portion related to what it would cost to put up the frost fence.
Right. But as of this bylaw, it now becomes a civil matter. It's nothing where you can force it onto taxes.
Correct.
The dispute mechanism is completely out of the municipal jurisdiction, and it's a discussion you have. Maybe those good fences don't make good neighbors, but I think the cost of those good fences don't make good neighbors.
Correct.
Right. Okay, thank you. So we come back to the process, and I take to Councillor Bell's desire to extend the period for 2 weeks, just to make sure it goes in. The mayor's mentioned that we go to the Niagara Farmers Monthly, because that's a great idea, because everyone does get at that. So the recommendation would be changed, if that were the case, that we advertise in the Niagara Farmers Monthly, the next issue, which is the first of the month, and that the bylaw not come into effect until the 15th of October, but that we leave the date of September 25th council meeting the same. Councillor Gannon?
Just going to weigh in a little bit on
Sure.
what had to be said about whether it was the Tuesday paper or the Thursday paper.
Sure.
It's just my experience that the Tuesday paper is more irregular around and about, and sometimes in town, the Niagara Farmers Monthly actually comes with the Thursday paper. So that would be sort of an surety.
Right.
More so that people would receive that.
So are we of one mind on those two amendments? Advertised in the Niagara Farmers Monthly, the bylaw will go to council on the 25th, and it will come into effect October 15th. And we do the Thursday paper as well, the clerk is asking me. So we'll be doing belt and suspenders, Thursday paper, Niagara Farmers Monthly. That's a real farming thing to do. Great. Okay. Prior to ratification of council, I'm not sure, can you do that? The 25th is ratification, but the Farmers Monthly doesn't happen until the beginning of the month. Oh, prior to, yes, and we instruct staff to proceed prior to ratification by council with placing the ads in the paper, in those appropriate papers. Okay? I know. It's an amendment, and I need a mover and seconder for that amendment. Councillor Bell, Councillor Ganan. Okay, so on the amendment, all in favor? Great. Now on the original motion as amended, that motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay. Now, the next item is a report with a recommendation report regarding change to the planning fees effective October 1st. And those recommendations are that PD 110-17 dated September 11th relating to change of planning fees effective October 1st be received, and that bylaw 2002-112 Committee of Adjustment tariff of fees be amended by replacing Schedule D tariff of fees with a new Schedule D as attached to this report, and that the bylaw 2011-28 tariff and fees for planning matters be amended by replacing Appendix A Schedule of Fees with the new Appendix A as attached to this report, and that the new planning fees take effect October 1st, 2017. I need a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Bell, Councillor Trombetta. The Director of Planning has told me that the same escalation clause that is used for development charges is what was put into play to affect these fees, so there should be no conflict with anything that developers or anyone is seeing on those. So comments from members of committee? Seeing none? All in favor? That motion carries. The next item, P9917, is a recommendation report with regard to the NPCA Policy Review Draft Living Landscape Document for Publication Consultation, and that is the PD 117-17 regarding NPCA Policy Review Draft Living Landscape Document for public consultation dated September 11th be received, and that NPCA staff be invited to a future committee meeting to discuss this policy report and the parallel mapping project and its impacts on West Lincoln and the Wellandport area. I need a mover for that. Councillor Bell, Councillor Trombetta. Comments? Councillor Bell?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the Director, do you know approximately when you would be inviting the NPCA?
Through you, Madam Chair, my preference would be to do it sooner than later. You know, if it's the consensus of everyone, we can try and send out word tomorrow and see if we can get them here for the October planning meeting, which I think is the Tuesday after Thanksgiving.
After Thanksgiving.
So, yeah, we can aim for that one if that's appropriate to everyone.
I'm good.
Okay. Okay. Okay, seeing no other comments, all in favor? That motion carries. The next, PD 100-17, that PD 126-17 regarding the Smithville Urban Expansion Project dated September 11th be received, and that township staff and the regional staff establish a timeline, process, terms of reference, and budget for the entire work plan and report back to a future Planning, Building, Environmental Committee meeting. I need a mover. Councillor Bell, Councillor Trombetta. Comments? Okay, seeing none. I do have some, and there seems to be some confusion around the urban expansion project. And Mr. Treble, if you could take a moment to tell us the timeline with the other pieces of mapping and the constraints that are being put on by Places to Grow, et cetera. A process for an urban expansion is not 20 minutes long. It's a number of years. So to hit to an urban expansion for this municipality is, what, about 6 or 7 years?
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't have a timeline completely finalized yet. I'm hoping to have one maybe even for next month. But it's expected that the studies and everything that are required will take in the range of 3 to 5 years themselves, let alone then trying to do the official plan amendment process and secondary plan process to bring the lands in. So it's a very long-term process that might hopefully see lands inside the boundary sometime, kind of decade of the 20s. It's just the nature of the beast. And what the province has done through you, Madam Chair, is they have certainly elevated the studies that are required. And although this isn't written anywhere, I think to ensure that those municipalities that are going to push for an urban boundary expansion are going to think this through wisely and fully before really embarking down that road, because it's a rather extensive, exhaustive, and challenging process. They've elevated the threshold dramatically. So I think the word discourage urban boundary expansions perhaps is part of the mantra of the province. They don't prohibit it, but they certainly have made the tests very high.
It made the hoops a little harder to get through.
Yeah.
And if we look at West Lincoln, truly within our urban area, in even just the Smithville, we have some empty spacing in our dentures throughout the existing downtown core that probably we need to persuade people to move towards redevelopment or development such that before we go out and create greenfield development. Is that what they're looking for?
That's certainly going to be a big piece of the puzzle that the province wants to see. Unlike the method of expansion south of the border, where you just sort of keep leapfrogging everywhere, this province, and I think rightly so, has taken a position to say, you know what, it's too costly to keep leapfrogging over pieces of land. Let's force development to occur on those lands and use them to their highest and best potential before we start consuming further greenfield lands. The other interesting piece in this, so just to finish that, not only do we have to try and encourage development of all of them, we have to encourage redevelopment of many of them too. And then when it comes to the lands outside the urban boundary, based on current policy that's been put in place through the province, the future lands that come in have to achieve higher densities at this stage than anything we have in Smithville right now on any sort of broad level.
Right.
They're talking a density of 80 people and jobs per hectare for the lands that come into the urban boundary. Something like the condo development on the same side of St. Catherine Street, just a few doors before you get to the Legion, that sort of apartment style kind of condo development, that achieves higher than the densities of the province, but there aren't very many sites in this municipality that achieve the kind of densities the province is talking about at 80.
Right.
It's a very high threshold. So, if the expansion intention is to proceed on 50-foot singles, we're in the wrong province.
And just not to, I know that the words in many reports have been carefully crafted, and no one has secured assurance of what the numbers are at the region. For instance, the report that gives allocation or suggests populations for 2041 is not approved yet by the region. So the 29,460 population and 8280 employment, that has been reviewed several times by the region, and I think some members of the committee have not yet come to grips with, at the regional level, that report is correct. I'm asking
Regional staff are operating based on the numbers in those reports. So the how we grow, how we flow, and how we go documents are all written based on the 29,460 number. I believe, though, that regional committee and council has never endorsed the report because of concerns that Welland keeps putting on the table.
I was just going to say, the mayor of Welland, who
So-
bent my ear at an event not that long ago. I'm going to let you weigh into this. Yes, sorry, I just wanted to get Mr. Treble to get it on. But yes, I believe it's the mayor of Welland who has some concern with it. And is that correct in your understanding, Mr. Mayor?
A little bit. What he has concern about is what's already inside his urban boundary and what he wants pulled out inside his urban boundary to make the urban boundary go a little bit of a different direction within his borders of Welland. Mr. Treble is exactly correct that all the assumptions have been made with the numbers that have been put forward, and that, in fact, that number of 29,460 is the number being considered for West Lincoln to the year 2041.
Right.
So,
So having said that, and I just continue with my comment, and that is that at 29,460, for West Lincoln to achieve that, in the plan that's been, I mean, the way it works, right? Tell me if I'm wrong. The province says this is how many we're going to get, tells all the regions where it's likely to happen, and gives you a population growth for both employment and or residential growth, and then that's allocated by the region to the various municipalities. At 29,460, another area of the region would have to de-designate lands in order to maintain, for us to get that 29,460, if I read the report correctly. Not this report, the one, play, grow, flow.
Through you, Madam Chair, the assumption is that Smithville cannot handle the growth to achieve 29,460. I think it's a safe assumption, but we haven't done the studies to be able
Sure.
to say that. The amount of land needed depends on the density.
Right.
So I think this is probably getting into more of the discussion that'll happen in a report perhaps next month. But I think at this point in time, our first step in an analysis is probably to figure out, okay, what do we think the right density target is for West Lincoln? And then take that to the region and the province and say, 80 doesn't make sense for us.
Right.
We know we need more land. We know we're strategically located for growth inside the region. All of those knows that, you know, are good pieces of the puzzle, and then argue that we deserve 60 or whatever the right number is that we think we should try and focus on. And you know, that's I think what will have to happen, and that will determine how much land we need and all of that other discussion. So you're right, we're assuming that there's an urban boundary expansion here. We certainly haven't proven that yet, though.
So at this point, we're working with 29,460, but I do understand that the region has put through a report that suggests that we may want to grow beyond that, but that's all up for discussion and not anything that this council has fully supported or in fact, made a decision on, because it's all part of a process that goes through a bunch of studies.
Yeah, what happened, Madam Chair, I think it was last May of 2016, we had a discussion around this horseshoe at the committee level around what we thought would be a good target for the region to be giving consideration to, and we put
Right.
forward 32 to 36, if I remember correctly.
in a memorandum of understanding, yes.
We fed that into the regional review before they actually decided what numbers to land on, because if you recall, the region put forward 3 options, said, you know, a low, medium, high option
Right.
for West Lincoln would be, and gave us numbers. I don't recall exactly what those numbers were. In the end, they landed on a number that's on the high end, not exactly option 3, I think was the high option, not exactly that, but close to that. And then there was a follow-up report from staff that effectively said, okay, you know, it's close enough to what we thought was reasonable that we're going to work with that. And
Our staff.
Our staff, yes. There was a report that we put forward to you guys in February of this year, or sometime this year.
Sometime this year, I just-
To say, you know what, it's not exactly what we asked for, but it's darn close. Let's work with it and try and make it happen. If I may just go back to a point the mayor had mentioned earlier. I believe another piece that registered with me in terms of the regional discussions, there's a piece of the puzzle that's still missing from the province. As much as we've got heritage mapping stuff going on and agricultural mapping stuff going on, there's another piece that's supposed to come out from the province this year on how you do your land budget. what lands are in for the calculation of densities and what lands you don't include in the
Right.
calculations of density. That piece of the puzzle isn't out yet, but is supposed to be out sometime later this year. And as I recall, the mayor of Welland was saying, well, why are you putting this report on the table until you know all of the provincial positions before you actually recommend what the densities should be, or what the population should be? So I think there was some delay waiting for this other piece of the puzzle that the province still hasn't even put on the table.
I think there's a lot. I think there's the ROI, because the province wants to know that you're not building in such a fragmented way that you're not going to have taxes to support it, et cetera. There's a lot coming out, and I take great credence in the fact that we've got a number of years before we're going to be seeing any kind of urban boundary expansion. Mr. Mayor, did you?
I forgot what I was going to say. I was just going to quite honestly just say that we did those numbers. We put forth those numbers to the region and ultimately to put forward those numbers to the province in a memorandum of understanding, and that's that number of 32,000 that you speak of, Mr. Treble. So, in fact, the region has used what we have given to them to say what is the guideline, where do we want to grow up to be, or where do we want to grow to. So I know that they're using that in numbers. There are a few things in planning in the Niagara region that we have to figure out. There's no question about it, but they're getting closer to doing that with the MCR, the Municipal Comprehensive Review.
Yep.
How we go, how we grow, and how we flow. So, and kind of one report follows the next report. So it's good that we're talking about this now. And, I don't know for sure if everybody can say it's going to take 7 years. I don't think we know. I just think that we have to be prepared that it's not something that's going to happen in 18 months. As long as we know that it's going to take
I guess,
a
Mr.
period
Mayor,
of
the
time
point,
when we do those
the
studies.
point is that it'll be well beyond the term of this council. And certainly,
Well, that's
one
for
of the
sure.
things that we have to make sure of is that the servicing we need to move forward in any aggressive fashion by 2041. It sounds a long way off, or making sure the roads, the speed controls, and the services that we need are in this municipality. I mean, in Halton Region, they approved all kinds of growth, and now they have allocation issues, and people are waiting, they thought they were going to have houses. They're issuing dry building permits, which may not allow that house, in fact, to be occupied until well after what was supposed to be the original closing date. So I don't want to get into that. I want to make sure that, like Mayor McCallion before us said, I don't want any growth without a school. I don't want any growth without these various other decisions being made. And that's, I think, what we have the chance to have the civil and comprehensive discussions about at this point. It's not about no growth. It's about the right kind of growth to go, flow, and what was that other one?
Go, grow, and flow.
Go, grow, and flow. So if we take into account everything, it's about this, the bypass for this community. It's about how traffic is going to go for the industrial sector. We would like to say those things before we get it imposed on us without those services. That's my point.
Yeah, and the good thing, Madam Chair, is the fact that with all of these documents being completed by the region and released, including on top of how we grow and how we flow and how we, I keep forgetting, go.
Go, flow, and grow. I got it.
And then the development charges piece came out,
Yes.
as we discussed back just before summer. And so all three of those are operating on the basis of West Lincoln getting 29,460. So
Right.
we know they've got in place the right servicing pieces, or at least they're telling us
Exactly.
that, and the right transportation pieces and the right DCs to collect all of that. So that is all well done, I think, by the region, and sets the stage nicely for us to then proceed with working towards trying to figure out how we make that happen.
Now you've hit the nail right on the head of where I'm concerned, and that is that if we start to have more growth with no additional services in there, it would look like our DCs could be watered down, and I sure don't want to go there until we have the comprehensive review of the associated services. So you hit the nail on the head for where I wanted this to go. Thank you very much. I don't think that was intended. Councillor Bell.
Through Madam Chair, Mr. Treble, when do you anticipate your next report coming out? There's a lot said tonight, a lot of reports coming forward.
Through you, Madam Chair, I anticipate trying to pull together a timeline and a strategy perhaps as early as October, but I might be a little bit optimistic. It might be more like November, but sooner. I'd like to have set the stage before budget.
Okay.
Okay, that's good, thank you.
Seeing no other comments with regard to that, I don't want to rush off, but notice we have a few other items still to do it. So we are on P 9917, properly moved and seconded. All in favor? That motion carries. We're not. We're at P 117. I apologize. The wrong number, but the right mover and seconder. So, other business, item P 10117. This is a memo from the Secretary Treasurer, a memo from the Secretary Treasurer of the Committee of Adjustment bylaw for information. There's no comments. We'll move.
Madam Chair.
Oh,
my apologies.
Mr. Treble.
This is to appoint a new Secretary Treasurer by the name of Alexa Cooper, who happens to be sitting at the table with me tonight.
Oh, yeah, right.
Alexa is with us. She will be your new Secretary Treasurer going forward once the bylaw is ratified.
Thank you. So we don't have to move or second that, we just have to approve the bylaw. Thank you for that, and welcome. Okay. On item P10217, with regard to the OMB consent application, there is an update with regard to that appeal. It's regarding Helen Kazan property. Mr. Treble.
It's just a very quick verbal update, Madam Chair, to advise that we had, along with Helen Kazan's legal counsel, requested the OMB to consent to an adjournment. And you'll recall some of those discussions at last month's meeting. The board issued a statement last week to confirm that they had accepted the adjournment request. So that now gives Ms. Kazan time to attempt to make an application for consent. At least that's what I anticipate we'll see come forward, along with a justification report for review by the Committee of Adjustment, and see whether or not that resolves the concerns or whether there is still a full hearing that will need to happen. So the board adjourned it with no timeline. So,
Thank you for that update. That it concludes the items on our regular agenda, except for items from members of committee regarding other business of an informative nature. Sorry, I'll get there. I just looked right instead of left, Mr. Mayor. Nothing here. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of council will be sending out a email letting you all know that there is a new business in town, Willow Tree, and they will be having a grand opening this week. So I'll give you the 5 W's about that. And also, I just want to remind council that this Sunday is the annual Terry Fox Run. It used to start at the Westlake Community Center at the arena and back in behind. Because of the construction going on of the MERS project, they have moved the registration and starting place to right behind our West Lincoln Township Administration building in the parking lot. And they're asking if you wish to walk, run, or ride in the Terry Fox to be here by 10:30 in the morning for the registration. Forms for pledges can be picked up, as I understand it, either online or at Icon Fitness, and it is being run this year again by a lady by the name of, I believe her name is Karen Pito. So if you want more information, just go on the Terry Fox
West Lincoln.
West Lincoln.
West Lincoln.
Actually, it's called Smithville Terry Fox website.
Excellent. Thank you very much for those. No, I just want to make sure I didn't overlook this side first. Councillor Bilsma, yes.
I didn't know if you were going to swing hopscotch.
Well, I kind of started and was going to go around, but I thought I
Bill and I
could.
looked at each other.
If you're going to talk about the Silverdale event, I was going to do that, but go
Okay.
ahead.
Great, then it's going to be done. So I was going to talk about the corn roast, which is Friday, and Silverdale puts on they just have such a good program there. I've enjoyed it for years and years and years, and so I just wanted to highlight that. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Gannan?
I was also going to mention the Willow Tree Studio. So although you will get an email from Mayor Joyner, it actually is Thursday, September 14th, and the ribbon cutting is 10 a.m., although they have an open house throughout the day, I think. So if you aren't available at 10, you might want to pop in sometime anyway.
So I know we'll get the who, what, and when, but what kind of a business is this going to be, Councillor Gannan?
It's a boutique of some sort with all kinds of interesting things and a beautiful window display that they do and change regularly. They haven't been open very long, and already their window has changed probably 4 times.
Excellent,
Nice addition to town.
excellent. Okay. Any others? Looking out, I have to say that there are a number of events happening over the next month and a half that we probably should be bringing to the fore for members of the community to know. I know there's a lot of fundraising activity going on, and of late, I guess, the fair has been I heard this morning that it was an amazing success, that they were very happy with the number of people that walked through the fair and participated in the various events. And I think there were some new things there that kind of sparked some new enthusiasm from people within the community. So I'm glad that people are bringing forward those things that are coming forward, but I know that there's dinners and social opportunities that I hope members of the community will take advantage of to support the causes. Anyway, Mr. Mayor, see, I'm sparking enthusiasm.
One last one is, also we might as well talk about it tonight, is the annual Harvest Roots, a celebration of arts and culture, will be happening on Saturday, September 30th, starting at 10 o'clock in the morning and ending up at 3 in the afternoon. It will be presented at 3 of our District School Board of Niagara elementary schools, one being College Street, Gainsborough, and Case Center. And each one of the schools has a different workshop for people to go and check out. So if you want to register, please register by September 13th. As in the past, these workshops do fill up very, very fast, and some people are left wanting to come and they just can't. So don't wait. Sign up as soon as you can.
Exactly. Those do fill up, and they leave a lot of people kind of just watching and drooling. Anyway, thank you. So, having gone through all of that, any new business items which require a motion? Seeing none, we move to confidential matters, and the item P10417 is for an item where Township Solicitor Sarah Premi and the Director of Planning will discuss a legal matter of solicitor-client privilege regarding industrial wind turbine applications, and the applicable closed session exemptions are litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or a local board, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. They are under separate cover, and there will be a verbal update. Item B, which is P105-17, which is again a legal matter with bylaw enforcement matters, site alteration bylaw update on specific various active files, and the applicable closed session exemptions are personnel matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. That will be a verbal update. And the final, not the final, sorry, is the bylaw enforcement update P106-17 regarding specific various active files, and the applicable closed session exemptions are personal matters, about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communication necessary for that purpose. That will be done verbally, and the not final yet. Good Lord. Another legal property matter with regard to affordable housing development, that the applicable closed session exemptions are proposed or pending acquisition or disposal of land by the municipality or local board, and the litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. Item P108-17 is again a report concerning legal or personal matters relating to an identifiable individual regarding a minor variance application, and the applicable closed session exemptions are personal matter, I have that in my head, personal matter about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. The recommendation is there that will be brought back to open session, and we'll deal with that. Then it is that the confidential report PD 12517 regarding a legal personal matter relating to an identifiable individual, more specifically with respect to a minor variance application, be received, and that staff be and are hereby authorized to proceed as directed in closed session. That will be coming back again after closed session. Item P109-17 is a confidential matter of legal and personal matters relating to an identifiable individual regarding a minor variance or rezoning, and the applicable closed session exemptions are personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. And the recommendation at this point that will come out of confidential is that the report PD 12417 regarding a legal personal matter relating to an identifiable individual, more specifically with respect to a minor variance and or rezoning application, be received, and that staff be and are hereby authorized to proceed as directed in closed session. Okay, so I am looking for a mover and a seconder to move into closed session. Councillor Bell, Councillor Ganan. Comments? All in favor? That motion carries. Thank you, and to those of you who have stuck with us, have a good evening.